Please welcome the Education Director for FDIC and the Editor-in-Chief of Fire Engineering, Bobby Halton.
Good morning, and welcome to the 80th Annual FDIC. I'm Bobby Halton. I am very honored to be with you here again this morning at the world's largest and only gathering devoted exclusively to providing world-class education by and for world-class firefighters. Thank you for coming. I really want to welcome you all here, and I must begin by thanking everyone who worked so hard to make this dream grow and improve again this year. There are so many to thank, but please help me one more time in thanking the voices of the IFD, the IFD Emerald Society Bagpipe Band, the Pike Township Color Guard for their service to us here this morning. They were absolutely beautiful. Thank them. I must also thank Father Edward Byrne for traveling all the way from New York, where he is the official chaplain for the Ossining, New York Volunteer Fire Department, whose members number over 600. I must also thank him for his service to us here this morning. But much like the old Irish joke about being from the Bronx, where everyone's a cop, a fireman, or a priest, that's my Uncle Ed. So in my family, we really are all cops, firemen, and priests. So please help me thank Father Ed one more time for his beautiful prayer. You know, I've known Father Ed my entire life, and my mom would be proud that he was here, so thanks for allowing me to indulge myself there. As you know, we've just finished our pre-conference activities, which this year officially makes us the largest hands-on fire service training event in history. And what an incredible 2 days they were. More than 300 of the world's best instructors were in the workshops and on the drill field. We had men and women from both coasts working side by side, volunteer alongside career, even a cop or two, providing the world's two best days of training ever. And yet, despite all these diverse backgrounds, we had no language barriers to overcome. We had no egos to soothe. There was no problem that we couldn't solve because you were there to make it happen. This event happened so well because you all care so much about your service to your communities back home that all problems just fade away. To the FDIC community, it's all about our work. It's all about service. We had the assistance of more than 50 fire departments throughout the region, from apparatus to staffing, from hand tools to ground ladders. Once again, the Northern Indiana area fire departments have rallied to support the training of its brothers and sisters from around the world. We cannot name everyone, and although I wish we could, please believe me when I say that because of you, we are safer and better prepared to serve our hometowns when we return. I'd like to thank all the departments who helped us for this selfless commitment to FDIC. We're also extremely grateful to all of the, I have one more huge thank you. We're extremely grateful to all of the industry manufacturers. You know, the manufacturers in the fire service are extremely generous people. They gave us tools. They provided us with support, multi-million-dollar pieces of equipment, and always with a smile and a kind word of encouragement. You know, the folks who work in the service industry and the fire service are extremely generous. And I sometimes wonder how they manage to make any money at all, because they're really more about serving us than they are about serving themselves. And we want to thank each and every one of them also for their support of the show. Thank you. It's all of these efforts together, the IFD, the regional departments, the world-class instructors, the industry suppliers, the city of Indianapolis, but most of all you, all of that together keep FDIC continuing to be the unifying foundation of the fire service. You see, it matters not how many times you've come. It matters not who is teaching what or who's actually standing here. It only matters why we come. And we come to train. And we come to train hard, and we come to train seriously. Now, I hope you can see the four men standing on the stage with me here this morning. They represent the four branches of our military services. They also stand here today representing the United States Fire Service and their hometowns. Now, each one of these men have served in our most recent conflict, and each one represents the American cultural value of respect for human life, dignity, freedom, and liberty, a right that we believe that all men were endowed with by their Creator, and a right for which this nation has always been willing to fight. Now, the defense... Thank you. Now, the defense of human dignity from disaster, fire, and catastrophe, that's what defines our service to our fellow men as firefighters. You know, I've used the word service a lot here this morning. That's a very important word for us, service. It's a very important word. We are the fire service. And service is our most fundamental guiding principle. Nothing is higher, because from service spread all of our other values. Service is rooted in humility. Another very important part of service is the recognition that our lives are only made meaningful when we do for others, not when we do for ourselves. Service means that we gratefully share our talents, our time for the benefit of others. Service means that we understand that every life is sacred and that everyone is entitled to, no, everyone is blessed with God's grace, and that we are obligated to protect that grace, human life, even at our own peril. These four men are the embodiment of service, humility, and sacrifice. And today they also represent the greater collected works of generations of soldiers, sailors, Coast Guard, airmen, Marine, and fire service members who have been and who continue to be, generation after generation, the greatest. The greatest example of service for whatever generation they happen to have been born into. Today I want to share with you one of the most inspiring stories you're ever going to hear. It's a story that's rich in humanity. It's steeped in dignity. It's a story about this community, about Indianapolis. It's a story about this country. It's about bravery, sacrifice, and honor. And most of all, it's a story about what it truly means to be a member of the American Fire Service. Let me take you back more than 60 years to July of 1945. Somewhere between Guam and Leyte Gulf, the USS Indianapolis is sailing alone to rejoin the fleet. Cruising unaccompanied was highly unusual during wartime, but she had just delivered a top-secret payload, and few knew where she was, and few knew why. Shortly after midnight, the Indianapolis was hit by 2 torpedoes from a Japanese submarine. The first one blew away her bow, and the second hit her amidship. The resulting explosion split her the keel, and within moments, she went down by the bow. The Indianapolis had 1,200 men on it. Survivors believed that 900, including badly wounded and injured men, made it into the water. There were few rafts that survived, and not every sailor had a life jacket, but still, 900 men were believed to have made it into that toxic, oil-coated sea that night. Survivors from that night would be much fewer, for sunrise of the first day in the water brought shark attacks, which continued until the men were physically removed from that water 5 days later. For 5 days, these 900 men faced the most terrifying days in the history of the United States Navy. And while these brave servicemen struggled against starvation and thirst, exposure, and the relentless brutality of the sharks, the Navy had no idea that they were missing. One by one, they were savagely taken, and one by one, the others grew more determined to survive, not for themselves, but to live to tell their brother's story, to live so that the rest of the world would never forget their brother's final act of service. The sharks did what the enemy's bullets couldn't do, what their bombs couldn't do. They brought fear into the men of the Indianapolis. They were a threat for which the men of the Indianapolis had no defense, no refuge, and no escape. And yet still, by another incredible act of selfless bravery, 5 days later, of the 900, only 317 men of legendary bravery were rescued from that water. Today, I ask each and every one of you, if you had survived that incredibly costly conflict and those 5 terror-filled days, what would you do with the rest of your life? Who among you today could stand up and dare to say that they were so brave that they would come home and be willing to risk their lives in service to this city, to Indianapolis, in the IFD? Who here among you today could dare to say that you believe that after enduring all these men endured, and after surviving, that you still needed to give more, to serve more, that more was required of you? And who here today would work tirelessly and stand as an example for the firefighters in Indianapolis, and who at every chance they got would work at conventions and gatherings to raise money so that the memory of the men lost in those waters would never be forgotten? Who here indeed today could dare to say that you were so brave? Anybody? Yeah. There's one man among us today who can, and he believes, no, he knows, that each and every one of you would do exactly what he did. And only he can say that. Only James O'Donnell. Today we are all honored because today sits in this room James O'Donnell. A man who can say he went into the water that night. A man who has that unshakable character, who has lived a life of service to his fellow man, both on the ill-fated Indianapolis and then serving for 35 years right here in the fire service in Indianapolis. I'm humbled, as everyone else in this room is, that we ask you one more time to serve us, James, by standing, so that all of us can see you clearly and express our admiration and grace. And I would like all the veterans in the room to stand also at this moment, please. All the veterans who served in our armed forces, stand. James, please stand. Veterans, please remain standing. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you James O'Donnell, a survivor of the last crew of the USS Indianapolis and a 35-year veteran of the fire service of Indianapolis. To recognize James, we also have his grandson, recruit firefighter James O'Donnell, who's going to now present his grandfather with a small token. Take it down to your grandfather, please. A small token of our esteem and gratitude, because you see, the fire service is about generations of service, about generations of sacrifice. We thank you, James, for your incredible life of service and for your incredible life of example. James O'Donnell. Fellow instructors, join with me now in asking that God may continue to bless and protect you and our fellow firefighters, that God may continue to bless and protect our sons and daughters who are serving today in our military, and defending this beautiful country. Thank you all for coming here this morning. And now let's celebrate together our service at the world's greatest gathering of fire service providers. Welcome to the official opening of FDIC 2008.